Welcome to this tour of Portland Works, a very special Sheffield landmark. Historic England gave this works a Grade 2 star listing. This is because of its importance as a remarkably intact example of an integrated cutlery works, and also because it was here that stainless steel cutlery was first successfully manufactured. In 1913, Sheffield chemist and metallurgist Harry Brearley developed a high chromium steel alloy which resisted corrosion. And it was here at Portland Works that Brearley approached works manager Ernest Stewart with a batch of this steel to see if it could be made into cutlery. After experimenting with different temperatures and processes, they achieved their goal, and the cutlery made at these works from this remarkable alloy rejoiced in the trade name Rusnell Stain. We are looking at the main frontage of the works. It was commissioned by local entrepreneurial cutlery maker Robert Feed Mosley and designed by the architect J.H. Jenkinson. Erected in the late 1870s, the works provided an efficient working environment for the flow of cutlery manufacture. Bringing together the various processes under one roof enabled cutlers like Mosley to ramp up production to meet the Victorian clamour for fancy goods for their tables, both at home and across the empire. Jenkinson has added a bit of style with contrasting colours and patterns of brick around the windows and along the frontage, and also with these stone features around the central doorway and around the cart entrance. Raw steel bars were carted in through this arch to be handworked by the smiths in the yard, and also, in modern works such as this, stamped into rough blanks by heavy drop hammers. Then the grinders and polishers would work their magic, turning dull metal into gleaming, keen-edged table utensils. As we tour round, we will note a few of the 30 or so businesses resident here at the works. A full list of our makers and craftspeople can be found on the Portland Works website. Entering through the cart entrance, we pass the premises of Paul Hotbrich's quality cabinetry business. And here in the first yard we find the hand forges. The fronts were originally open, and each bay would have a skilled smith forging and shaping the bars into blanks, ready to continue their way through the factory process. Occasionally he might cross the yard to reshape or smooth one of his implements on this hand-cranked grinding wheel. In this yard we find Pam Haig, who has been making lino cutting tools here for over 30 years. And in the far left corner, Mick Shaw, a traditional machine engraver. We are struck by the great number of windows built into each floor. These were essential, providing a good level of natural light for the intricate processes involved in producing ornate cutlery, penknives, tableware, razors and scissors. Looking past the original single-storey boiler shed, now a bottling plant for the fine local Loxley gin, we see the remains of a once tall chimney. Truncated in the Second World War to prevent it being used as an aiming point for the Luftwaffe, it now presents different problems as we grapple with how to maintain it in a safe condition. Walking on towards the rear block of the works, we pass the steps up to Tom Titch Tyler's exotic guitar-making business, and we note the stable door of a meticulously restored smithy, now a gin school. This restoration is just one of the many projects undertaken by our Tuesday volunteers. This is a group of local folk who, from the time the works were saved in 2013, have put in many hours of unpaid work rectifying the damage resulting from 50 years of neglect by successive owners. The volunteers' unrelenting efforts to repair rotting windows, broken guttering, blocked drains, crumbling mortar and leaking roofs means that we now have not only a much more sustainable building, but also more renovated premises available to rent out to the local innovative makers that we aim to support. This rear block was where the steel blanks were shaped and sharpened on hefty local sandstone grinding wheels. Highly skilled, well paid, but dangerous and health-sapping work. As we move along this block, we pass the doors to the Central Forge building. This is occupied today by Andy Cole, who still uses some of the original spring hammers to forge bespoke hand tools. Ahead of us, we see further evidence of the costly efforts needed to rehabilitate these works. Here, using funds from our hard-working charity arm, the Friends of Portland Works, we replaced these two brick columns as they had been severely damaged by water leakage. And the replacement windows were made here at the works by Linthorpe Joinery. In this workshop, tenant Mark Jackson now produces natty square pegs, coat hanging systems for schools. Moving on, we find a wonderfully worn set of external stone steps. These were used to gain access to the first floor of the hafting block, where exotic cutlery handles were fashioned and fitted. Note the stone inserts added to restore the steps to their former shape, these having been worn down completely by the clogs of countless workers. Nowadays, these steps take us up to the distillery, where Loxley gin is made, to Pippa, our high-tech rug maker, and to Kevin Wildbore's handmade leather goods workshop. As we walk up through the yard, we pass Pete Ledger and his family's silver plating and Buffer Girl jewellery businesses. Across the yard, we find these somewhat Spartan metal steps, one of the work's legacies, left to us by earlier tenants' spirit of thriftiness, improvisation, and lately of repair. This spirit of innovation and improvisation is kept alive today by the members here at the Sheffield Hackspace unit. These steps lead up past Stuart Mitchell, whose individually made knives are exported and collected the world over, and along then to the door of Bailey Jewellery, makers of a unique modern bespoke bracelet and accessories fashioned from the very stainless steel now so readily associated with the city of Sheffield. Up another set of steps and we emerge onto an odd flat section of roof, bookended by two rough walls. This section was a continuous part of the third floor, but was so badly damaged by a fire in 1939 that it was deemed beyond repair. Now, it affords a great view of the surrounding contemporary works, such as Stag, Harland and Clifton. Thankfully, these too have survived the developers' bulldozers, but have been repurposed for softer industries, leaving Portland Works as the only one with a roster of original metal bashers. Back in the yard, we pass Carl Whittam's commercial photography studio, based in the works' former finishing room. Now looking up, we can see the infill buildings erected over the yard to provide additional workspace. This floor includes the wonderful lantern room, a graceful space where the work's glitzy wares were displayed, top lit by a continuous set of delicate roof lights, the repair of which presented our volunteers with one of their sternest challenges. Nowadays, that same generous light offers a great working space for our resident artists. A little further along the yard, we find Michael May producing his beautiful pocket knives, and we see the latest unit that our volunteers have renovated, now offering a home for blacksmiths James and Pete. We now emerge into the hallway behind the impressive front door of the main entrance. This was reserved for wealthy customers and for the agents of overseas buyers coming to stock up with beautiful case goods to sell to customers the world over. These goods received their final polish and were packed in yards of paper and satin in the room on our left. Here an overseer would have ensured work was completed to the highest standards. These days, after doing duties as a recording studio for one of the several bands who have made their home here, this space is now an atmospheric, multi-purpose room. Passing some of the artist's work as we walk further into the first floor, we find the Mosley Room, a space dedicated to the display of products and associated papers from the work's heyday. Both the Sheffield cutlery industry and the items celebrated here are just a proud memory now. By the late 1960s, the works was no longer a centre of cutlery production, and the once proud name R.F. Mosley was gone. The final room on our tour is the operational nerve centre for the works. Here we find our two hard-working, part-time, paid staff members. Works manager Donna is tasked with the myriad jobs involved in keeping the works in order on a daily basis. And education and outreach officer Stella is constantly developing new initiatives to raise the profile of the works within local education and across the wider heritage arena. In 2009, local people began to take an interest in the heritage value of this important historical community asset. Over the next 4 years, a mixture of concerned volunteers, local professionals, politicians and tenants from these and other works together orchestrated a campaign that resulted in sufficient funds being raised to buy the works. Their aim from the outset was to preserve the structure and purpose of the site as one that both supports the existing businesses and also provides affordable spaces for the next generation of innovative Sheffield makers. Thanks to their initial efforts and to the ongoing work of the volunteers who now run Portland Works Little Sheffield Limited, this remains an active and very real economically viable workplace, as well as a dynamic focal point for Sheffield's fabulous cutlery heritage.